Yes. Whew. This also hitting the spot. I'm here to review another book for you. It's been a prolific reading week for me. Like, I think I've finished a book every single day this week. Not that I've been reading them in a day, but that I've just been finishing them. Because I will read like 10 books at a time. But they're all like, I'm wrapping them all up in the same week, so it's been a vibe. Okay, so I read The Lioness of Morocco. This is part of a challenge that I have for myself this year. It started last year, or maybe even the year before last, to read all of the books that I was gonna say physical TBR, but some of them are like virtual as well. But all the books that I already own, that I bought, they're books that have been gifts or that are hand-me-downs from family members, either that have passed or whatever. So those books I didn't necessarily pay for and intend to read, so I'm not counting those. I'm counting the ones that I chose for myself, I paid for them, and I intended to read them, and for some reason didn't necessarily read them in the time immediately following purchase. So I'm trying to work through that, and I have like a temporary moratorium on buying new books, even though there's been about 4 or 5 books that have slipped past that moratorium. Just because I don't want to go into a reading slump, and also like experiential purchases, right? Like I did get a gift card for Christmas. I did go shopping when I had family come in to town. This Lioness of Morocco book is a part of me trying to read books that I already own. I bought this years ago as an ebook that was on sale. So it was like $1, $2. I was vaguely interested in it, and I was just like, oh, like it's on sale. You know, that kind of mindset. And then upon like further review, I've just put off reading it because I'm not necessarily a historical fiction girly. So this is, I think, my first historical fiction that I've ever read, potentially. And I will say this, it's still not my genre, but I enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 4 stars, and I would say that purely because at the end, it was just tea. It was just like so much plot, and a very interesting plot. I think this would be an incredible movie. Like, please, somebody pick this up as a movie. It would be so good. It's giving me Count of Monte Cristo vibes. I also think the setting of Morocco is like really just, you can do some really fun, beautiful, vibrant things with like the setting and the outfits, everything. So I would love to see this as a movie. And it's also like a great love story, and kind of about like how like one choice or how like timing can really just like change everything. And how like even if you're never with someone, like officially, like how much you can truly love them. So yeah, I think this would just be so cinematic, like I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I would say 4 stars for that reason, and also because I dreamed about this book. I was still thinking about it the next morning after I finished it, like that prior night. And so that to me like says a lot, especially for a genre that I don't usually pick up. So but essentially our main character is Sibylla. She's always wanted to do more with her life. She's always wanted to travel, see Morocco. In the beginning of the book, we see her get courted and then married, and then that person ends up taking up the post in Morocco, or her husband ends up taking the post in Morocco for her father's company. So they get to move to Morocco. They end up staying there. This story spans about 20 to 30 years. A lot happens, but at some point her husband is like indisposed, and she then takes over the duties of her husband and is able to run that company until like, you know, she finally gets this independence that like she has craved her whole life. There's a lot of other things that go on, but I don't really want to like spoil that because it's like it's a really fun, interesting, well told story. But I would say if that interests you at all, like I really don't have many complaints about this book, so I would say like definitely check it out. It was a good read. It was a little bit slow in the beginning. That's one thing I will say. It's a little bit slow in the beginning, but once it gets going, it gets going. I couldn't put it down. Like in the beginning, it was like slow going, but once I hit, I would say like the 40% mark, couldn't put it down. I really enjoyed it. I saw some reviews that like the language was very simplistic, and the characters were like not that fully fleshed out, and I would agree. I think part of it might be a translation thing because this book, I believe, is originally written in German. But I don't know, like I think it is a book that's really heavy on plot and setting. I would say plot and setting are key. I think if you're looking for character development, if you're looking for character study, if you're looking for like extravagant like writing that you can really just be like, oh, this is so beautifully written, this is not your book. It's just not. But yeah, I really enjoyed it for the things that it was good at. So I can't say much negative about it. The one thing that I will say, before we get into like spoiler territory and get into what I really wish was different, which is just an opinion thing. It's nothing to do with whether it's a well-written piece. It's just like my opinion of how I wish things, would have gone. Because one critique that I do have is there is a servant and their employer, master, however you want to put it, that have an affair. And I don't like that it was treated as consensual, in particular because it was between a Black servant and a white like employer. Like, if we're being honest, and I believe these servants were like freed slaves, so they used to be slaves. Like, if we're being honest, that dynamic typically is coercive. It's not some loving affair. So I just didn't like that inclusion. Like, I think I would have rather not them pretend like it was some affair and it was this consensual thing, because I just think like if we're going for historical fiction, it's not very historically accurate. I think in a way that like shies away from the reality of it. And I think if you're going to shy away from the reality of it, don't even include that to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, have that certain person have an affair with their equal, not with someone who's like under their employ, in that dynamic where it's typically coercive anyway. Like, I just didn't like that they tried to pretend like it wasn't, and like it was a genuine affair. Like, if you wanted it to be this loving affair thing, have him have an affair with like the next door neighbor, it would have been doubly bad because that person probably would have been married too. So that would have even been like more spice and more, tea for the plot. So I just didn't love that. It was not like a big point in the book anyway. I also didn't love the way that slavery was mentioned. Like, I feel like it was a little bit dismissive, or not dismissive, but I just didn't think it was given the weight that it should be given. And that's part of my reason why I don't love historical fiction, or why it's not something that I'm drawn to, and it's because like I think slavery and a lot of other like atrocities that have happened in the past, if you're choosing war times or whatever setting or backdrop that you're choosing that's in historical times, a lot of times have these very like painful, traumatic things that are going on to groups of people, and that they're in the background when you're trying to tell the story of like love or whatever it is that you're trying to tell. And it just sometimes feels a little tone deaf, So I didn't love the inclusion of it. I think they could have told the story without even mentioning slavery. One of the characters gets accused of being involved in the slave trade when it was illegal in Morocco, but I wish they would have just like made them involved in the drug trade or something else that's also illegal, that wasn't then referencing this extremely weighty thing in society and not giving it the room for it to be weighty and for it to be tragic and horrifying, Yeah, I think the story could have remained the same, and we just skipped over that. But I'm sure then there would have been a critique of like, this is not accurate because they didn't mention blah, blah, blah. So you really can't win a lot of times, but I would have rather do without it. But that's part of the reason why I don't love historical fiction, because I want to be entertained. And like, when we're thinking about human beings' worst atrocities, like, it's hard to like have that in the background and then also be like, oh, but these people are in love and it's so beautiful, you know? Like, it's a little bit incongruous to me. Probably for obvious reasons, guys. But anyway, we'll move on. I think that's really it for like the non-spoilery side of things. But I would say definitely pick this up if the plot at all interests you. Anyway, okay, going into spoilery territory. One of the things that happens is Sibylla's husband ends up being presumed dead. She had this kind of like flirtation and interest in this French ex-soldier. She doesn't explore it until her husband has actually passed, right? And then she ends up getting pregnant. We don't know this at this point, but that Frenchman, he gets this land from the Sultan. He goes to build up the farm. He's like, come visit me in 6 weeks. I want to like make this place like a place that you could settle down with and you could bring your kids and all of that. The Sultan sends him people to his land to actually like work on it, help him build the place up because it's kind of in disrepair. And then he also sends him a bride because he's like, oh, it's not good for men to be alone, or she's meant to be a bride, maybe even to be a concubine, whatever. Andre, who's the Frenchman, whatever he wishes. He wants to send her back because he only wants one woman, and that woman is Sibylla, our main character. And now that her husband's presumed dead, you know, she would be free to be with him. Convince him not to send her back because she'll be killed. Because, yeah, it'll be like dishonoring, I guess. And they go into it. Well, I don't want to like spend a million years explaining it, but he, you know, he's to be kind. He's like, I'm not going to send her back right now, but like I will send her back because I don't want to be married to her or do anything with her. On the last night, she knows she's going to be sent back. On the last night, she and her, it's like handmaid or something, conspire, and they like, oh, we're gonna make you dinner, say thank you for allowing us to stay here all this time, thank you for your kindness, your hospitality, whatever. During this dinner, the said potential bride, drugs him and sleeps with him. She also gets pregnant. Tea, guys, okay? And then in the morning, he wakes up super hungover, doesn't really even remember what happened, and then that's the day Sibylla, our main character, shows up to visit him, and she sees the two of them together and is like, oh, you moved on that quick. 6 weeks. I gave myself to you and you moved on that quick. So she turns around. She's on like horseback. She's ridden like days to go see this man. She turns around immediately and leaves and doesn't give him a chance to explain himself. What I don't love about this is that we never see him actually go and fight for her. Like, allegedly he says he tried, but clearly not well enough. I'm like, if you love this woman, if this woman is the love of your life, years and years later, the daughter you guys had together that he doesn't even know about, then that daughter is grown. You're still in love with this woman. You still miss her. You didn't fight for her. Like, I didn't love that. Like, especially because obviously he doesn't know this, but like he could have saved her from like having to lie about the paternity of her child in a time when, you know, obviously like being born out of wedlock is like crazy and unheard of. I didn't like that he didn't fight for her. And the other thing is that they end up together in the end, but only after he's built a whole life with the other bride that he didn't even really want to begin with, but he ends up being with her just because she gets pregnant. Obviously, he's a solid guy. He ends up growing to love her. She's actually, you know, seemingly a good wife, but I'm like, she drugged you. Like, I know, like, she, in essence, like, throughout their lifetime makes up for it, but I just feel like that wasn't given enough weight and enough pause that, like, that was literally assault. And in essence, something you can't make up for. I understand the context, because as a woman, it's like, now that she's been defiled and she, you know, whatever, like, from his perspective, he's like, I gotta protect her and, like, protect her, like, honor. But it's just, I don't know. And it's like, desperate people do desperate things. But I just feel like there wasn't enough weight given to the fact that, like, he was drugged and assaulted and then ended up married to this woman. And that the only reason he ends up back with Sibylla is because that woman dies. So, like, I just didn't love that he didn't choose Sibylla in the end. Like, I would have much rather him just, like, wise up and say, I tried to love you, but you did this awful thing to me. I'm going to be with the woman that I truly love. Like, I would have preferred that than the way they wrote things. But it is, in essence, more of, like, a complex love story in the way that it was actually written. It has value and it has merit as is, but I just didn't love that because I'm like, what message? I feel like, oh, girl's kind of getting off easy for having like drugs and assaulted this guy, you know? I don't know. Anyway, I feel like that could be like a very touchy topic. I don't want to spend too much more time on it, but I just feel like it wasn't given the weight that it was due. And I think that's like the real of like so much of this is I feel like certain things just weren't given the weight that they could or should have been given, considering like what these actions are, you know? Anyway, this is the 11th billion time my phone is ringing, so I hope that this is not like coming up in the audio, but I'm gonna call it here. I'd say it is a 4-star read. Check it out for yourself. But yeah, they're, you know, like all books or any media, like there's little things where I was like, I wonder why we chose this way. And I don't know if maybe the story could have been elevated if there was a different approach. But who am I to say that, you know? Anyway, that's that. See you on the flip side.